Good evening and welcome to the York-Simcoe Federal All Candidates by-election debate. I'm Jennifer Anderson, Executive Director of the Georgina Chamber of Commerce. The objective of the Georgina Chamber is to promote, develop, and foster the well-being and interests of the business community and enhance the quality of life for all citizens of Georgina. We achieve this in many ways, including an event like this, hosting this debate. It allows constituents, whether here in the room or at home tonight, to meet the candidates, learn about their platforms, and make an informed decision before casting their ballot on election day. I'd like to welcome the candidates here tonight and thank all of the candidates who are running for your dedication and your efforts. Thank you to everyone in attendance here at the link and to those who are joining us live on Rogers TV. You have this ability to join us and watch on TV and online thanks to Rogers TV Georgina. We are so fortunate to have a television station in our community dedicated to informing residents. This debate will air multiple times before and including Election Day. I would also like to thank and introduce our moderator for this evening for her time and her commitment. She is the founder and editor of the Georgina Post, and she's the host of Politically Speaking on Rogers TV. Please welcome our moderator this evening, Karen Wolf.
Thank you. Well, good evening and welcome to the York-Simcoe by-election debate. My name is Karen Wolf and I will be your moderator this evening. This debate, as you know, is being brought to you by the Georgina Chamber of Commerce and Rogers TV Georgina, and I want to thank them for providing us with this opportunity. I hope that this gives you a chance, actually, to get to know the candidates better and learn about their platforms on the issues that really matter to you. So I'm going to be introducing the candidates in a few moments, but first I want to explain some of the ground rules that we're going to adhere to this evening during the debate. Each candidate is going to be given 2 minutes for opening remarks at the beginning and 2 minutes at the end of the program for closing comments. A random draw was conducted earlier this evening to establish the order for opening remarks, and that order is going to be reversed at closing statements. So this is a public debate. And to prepare for the event, the Georgina Chamber of Commerce previously has reached out to the public and invited them to submit questions for the candidates. In addition, the audience that's with us this evening here at the link has been encouraged to submit questions in written form. All of the questions received, and I have to say the response has been overwhelming, have been vetted to meet our needs for time constraints and to avoid duplication. So what that means is we're probably not going to get to all of the questions, but we're going to do our very best to make sure that we cover as many topics as possible. Answers to the questions and the rebuttal responses will be limited to 1 minute. Candidates wishing for an opportunity to comment on something that they've heard will let me know that they want to comment on it, and I'll recognize you, and that should be done prior to the next question, however. So our timekeeper, Betty Banks, will signal with the time card when a candidate has 15 seconds remaining. This is Betty. And she's, at the end of your time, she's going to raise another card that will signal to the audience to applaud to end the commentary. So we're looking forward to a respectful and informative 2 hours of discussion. We have an important decision ahead of us on February the 25th, and I encourage everyone to make the most of the time we have together. So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce the 6 candidates seeking your vote in the York-Simcoe by-election. On my immediate left is Robert Gertz, the People Party of Canada. Next to him is Sean Tanaka, the Liberal Party of Canada. Next we have Jesse McLean, the New Democratic Party of Canada. the New Democratic Party of Canada, I'm sorry. Next, we have Matthew Lund. He's with the Green Party of Canada. And Scott Davidson, the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada. And our sixth candidate, Keith Komar, is missing in action. Last I heard, he was having car trouble. So we were recently notified that three other candidates will be running in this by-election. Adam Sir from the National Citizens Alliance Party, Dorian Baxter from the Progressive Canadian Party, and John Turmel, which I think a few of you noticed earlier this evening, as an independent. However, due to the late timing of their declaration, we were unable to accommodate them here this evening.
I do want to thank you for mentioning us, though. It was very kind. I just for a slight correction, it is not the...
Okay, so at this point, we're going to start a discussion with opening statements, and I would like to remind you that you each have 2 minutes with opening remarks, and I would like to invite Robert Gertz to begin.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor tonight to introduce myself, Robert Gertz, and the People's Party of Canada to the constituents of York-Simcoe. What we have here, everybody, is a financial crisis. Maxime Bernier is the only one who has realized that we need to break away from both the Liberals and the Conservatives because they have both become too morally and intellectually corrupt to protect all Canadians on the continued sellout of our financial future to the corporate elite. No longer are either the Liberals or Conservatives prepared to ask the hard questions or make the hard decisions to protect the millennials from becoming the ever more generation of the generation screwed. But tonight I come to you with both, unfortunately, a dire warning, but also, fortunately, I come with you a visionary and inspirational alternative to our impending catastrophic financial future. The dire warning, however, is this, that unknown to many of you, in October of 2016, Justin Trudeau made it obligatory that all Canadians must report the sale of their principal residence as part of their that year's annual income. This requirement has cleared the way for the Government of Canada to tax our homes. Mathematically, this or some other future imposed inheritance tax will be the easy solution to the future of a tax burden that is scheduled to hit $1.1 trillion at least before the end of the 2030s. In short, Justin Trudeau is clearing a path to tax our homes. Fortunately, however, in contrast to this dire warning, the People's Party of Canada wants to inspire a creative solution revolution.
Thank you. Sean Tanaka.
I just want to thank the Georgina Chamber of Commerce for having us here this evening, and I want to also thank Rogers Georgina for hosting as well. And I want to thank all of you guys for coming and bringing your questions and your concerns to the candidates and for getting involved. I ran in 2015 for the Liberal Party. I increased the Liberal voter turnout by 400%, and we've picked up right where we left off. This time around, it took some discussions with the family as to whether or not I should run, and my boys, with perhaps a little bit of bias, said I should because they thought this time I was going to win. And I asked them why they were so certain, and one of the twins, Kaz, said, because you're a mom. So I'm proud that we're raising a generation of children who think that women are superheroes and capable of moving mountains. I'm also proud to be representing the Liberal Party in this by-election because they prioritize families. 20,000 children here in York-Simcoe rely on the Canada Child Benefit. 17,000 seniors rely on the old age security and guaranteed income supplement. But it's also a party who values educators. And as a professor of geography, I appreciate evidence-based policy, particularly when it comes to protecting our environment. but it's also a party that knows that better is always possible. We have delivered some amazing results right here in York-Simcoe, but of course there's more work that can be done. So I want to be your progressive voice in Ottawa and bring your concerns as your Liberal Member of Parliament.
Jesse McLean.
Thank you, Karen and Jennifer, and thank you everyone for coming. We've been knocking on doors since mid-December, listening to fellow residents and really taking note of the issues that are important to them. A lot of people are struggling just to keep the roofs over their heads. A lot of our community is cutting their pills in half or going without their medications entirely because they can't afford it. We're all concerned about the environment, and a lot of us are very distressed over the lack of action around climate change. But overall, what we're hearing from people is that this system is not working for the most of us, and they're right. Now, so I'm really excited to get into the issues here today because we at the NDP have a lot of bold ideas, and all of them are aimed at bringing our entire community up. We will make life more affordable for people, and we will finally fight economic inequality with the political will that we have been lacking in Ottawa for a very long time. It's not that my opponents don't know that affordable housing is a crisis or that inequality rises every single year. And it's not that they don't understand the urgency to act on climate change. We've all read the reports. It's that their parties absolutely refuse to prioritize the needs of the working class over the demands of big business. This is especially evident when they claim that there's no money for pharmacare, yet when it comes time to bail out big corporations like GM, buy pipelines, or constantly audit average taxpayers, the funds are there. They use scare tactics over and over again to discourage us from fighting for meaningful change. But the truth is, all of the things that I'm going to present to you today are not just possible, they're what we deserve. Thank you.
Matthew Lund.
Thank you, and thank you again to the Georgina Chamber of Commerce here for putting on this great event here. I myself am a member of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and I understand small business. I'm a small business owner myself. I understand how the Chamber of Commerce actually benefits small business in the community, and that's certainly something that needs to be harnessed and worked with a lot more by our government. My roots in this electoral district now go back 5 generations. Both my grandfather and father before me were community organizers, and I want to follow in their footsteps and help lead the community to a better future. My lovely wife and I have 2 kids. We have a hobby farm out in the country, and when I'm not doing that, I'm an independent paralegal. I've worked in large law firms, and I help advocate for families that need homes as well. I advocate for small businesses that are getting screwed over by the system. I'm here to dispel any myths regarding the Green Party that have been skewed by the other parties. In a world where Liberals and NDP have moved to the extreme left and the Conservatives and the People's Party occupy the far, far right, the Greens occupy that large space in the middle, the gray area that encompasses 90% of all Canadians. We are the party that is fiscally progressive as well as being small business centric, while at the same time forward-thinking with socially progressive ideals. We are the middle ground that looks at universal health care as our most important political achievement as a country and not just a financial burden as some parties might have you believe. 40 years of Liberal and Conservative governments have left us with declining middle class, students buried under crushing debt, the climate on the brink of collapse, and a social safety net that is in shambles. To all those that have lost faith in this corrupt system of politics that has eroded our fundamental and core principles as human beings, the Green Party looks at the holistic approach, identifying the root cause of any issue with full cost accounting. We are the party that is your source for social and economic freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scott Davidson.
Good evening, York-Simcoe. Thank you to the Georgina Chamber of Commerce and Rogers TV for organizing this debate this evening. The communities within the riding of York-Simcoe have been home to me for my entire life. I grew up here, owned and operated businesses here, raised a family here. And now I want to focus all my energy and passion to represent you as our next Member of Parliament. My family and I have been fortunate. However, I am concerned about the future of our country and the challenges that my son's generation will face. Challenges like securing a career, buying a house, and raising a family. All things that my generation took for granted. These are all the issues that have motivated me to run for office. I look forward to a constructive debate on the issues that the voters of York-Simcoe have told me that matter most. Issues like improving the environment for small business to thrive and prosper. Issues that include ensuring the health and sustainability of Lake Simcoe, and issues like making sure our riding gets its fair share of federal funding and infrastructure dollars, the support that many local projects need. The current Liberal government in Ottawa made promises after getting elected in 2015. Yet when I go door to door, most people are hard-pressed to identify anything the Trudeau government has done that has improved their lives and the people in York-Simcoe. People who know me as someone who doesn't stop until the job gets done. York-Simcoe deserves a champion who will stand up for our interests. My name is Scott Davidson, and I look forward to earning your support.
Thank you all. And now on to our lineup of questions. We will rotate who goes first as we go along. For the first question, I'm going to ask Sean Tanaka this question to start. What makes York-Simcoe unique in your eyes, and what makes you the best choice for voters to represent us in Ottawa?
I grew up in this riding, and I'm raising a family in this riding. So I'm well aware of the beauty of our natural environment, of the fact that we have really distinct, amazing communities in the 4 different municipalities that make up York-Simcoe. One of the things that I think the Liberal Party is, the Liberal government is providing, particularly to York-Simcoe, is the Canada Child Benefit. It is raising money for 20,000 children here in York-Simcoe rely on that benefit so that they can use it for nutritious food or hockey practice or school supplies or whatever their family sees fit. We're also making sure that we are helping our seniors, and there's 17,000 seniors right here in York-Simcoe that rely on the old age security and guaranteed income supplement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jesse McLean.
So I chose to live in York-Simcoe after being raised in Toronto, and we came here because what I think is special is the environment. Lake Simcoe itself is a real treasure of the riding, and we have to take care of it. And not just by throwing money at a cleanup, which is essential, but we need to start looking at how we preserve our environment and how we stop contaminants from going into our lake. Another thing that's really special is our people and the needs that they have. And I'm best suited to represent them because that's what I've been doing so far. I am a community organizer. I do already advocate for working class people, and I lobby the government for the things that we deserve. So I'm perfectly suited to the challenges ahead of us here in York-Simcoe, and I look forward to doing it.
Thank you very much. Matthew,
thank you. What makes York-Simcoe special? I think the nail was hit on the head with Lake Simcoe. It's a great natural resource that we take for granted. I also look at the Holland Marsh as one of the most important resources, not just for York-Simcoe, but for all of Canada. Certainly don't want certain governments to come in and turn it into condos. I feel like that I would be the best possible candidate for this riding because I think that we are tired of the same old politics as usual. I think that we need to have a different voice. 40 years have gone by and we're no better off. Everything is declining. We need to have a better voice. We need to have a new voice. I'd like to be that voice to represent you in Ottawa.
Thank you. Scott Davidson.
Thank you, thank you. I think the people that make up York-Simcoe are the most important. York-Simcoe to me is almost a snapshot of Canada. And York-Simcoe as well is home to many small businesses, and I really believe right now that small business has lost its voice in Ottawa. Small business, if you look around York-Simcoe, is your local convenience stores, your Sobeys, your home hardwares, all your local business owners that are supplying employment for youth. It's very, very important that we support our small businesses. And just a Liberal government basically calling small business tax cheats is not the way to move forward with small business. So I'm a big proponent of that in York-Simcoe.
Thank you very much. We have Mr. Gertz.
Thank you. I'm the best one to go into Ottawa for you because you're first. You are going to be the first constituency that will be able to send a People's Party representative into Ottawa. The bottom line is, there is really no geographical difference. I grew up in Halton Hills. I went to Mayfield Secondary School, so I'm your neighbor, okay? Am I living in this jurisdiction right now? No, but I'd be happy to move back. The bottom line is this. We need to stop the lies. One of the things that's happening and why the kids are tuning out and everyone is losing touch is because we are getting lied to on a regular basis. And now we are going to be saddling our next generation with a debt that they can't cover. The bottom line is you guys know that there's been wage stagnation and the rich are getting richer and we're not. And the reason is because of the lies. They pretend that they're looking after us when in fact they're looking after the big banks and Bay Street. So the bottom line is this. If you want to get real change, imagine how much courage it took for Maxime Bernier to walk away from the Conservative Party and say, listen, you're morally and intellectually corrupt.
Okay, Mr. Gertz, thank you so much. Ms. Tanaka, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment about small business. And I was just going to say, I agree that small businesses here in Georgina should be looked after. And it's the Liberal government who has lowered the business tax rate from 11% to 9%. And what does that mean? Well, that puts more money in the pockets of local businesses. When they have that money, they are empowered to grow their business, increase wages for their current employees, and create new well-paying jobs right here in York-Simcoe. So it's the Liberal government who is making sure that small businesses right here in York-Simcoe are getting more money in their pockets.
Thank you very much. Matthew Lund, what's next?
And I was just going to add, for the Green Party, our philosophy on helping small businesses to eliminate payroll taxes, because that way the owners of that small business are able to keep more and then also pay their employees more. So it's a much more fundamental principle that actually helps small businesses thrive in this community.
Thank you very much. Jessa, did you want to add something?
I just have a brief comment just to remind everybody that the Liberal tax cuts for small business only happened in 2017, despite being promised for a lot longer than that. And it was really only done very reluctantly. And to giving a voice to small business, we had 12 years of Conservative representation, and our main streets are still struggling. So I'm not sure that a Conservative representative is something that can fulfill that promise, because they haven't yet.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. And this question, we'll ask Jessa McLean to start. The question, according to the CRTC Commission, by the end of 2021, 90% of Canadian homes and businesses will have access to broadband speeds. What assurance can you offer that convinces residents York-Simcoe will not be left out?
Okay, well, the NDP has a great plan to really invest in infrastructure. That'll give provinces and municipalities the ability to improve their infrastructure, which can help service rural communities like ours. The NDP is fully committed to making both internet and cell phone services also more affordable. Right now, a lot of people are priced right out of it, even if they could receive the service. We know that's an essential service, almost as important as our water and our electricity. And NDP has been the only party in the House of Commons that has been advocating against the fees, the growing fees, and unfair billing practices of these telecoms. So if there's any party that can push these companies to do what they need to do and to supply the money to do it, it's going to be the NDP.
Okay, thank you very much.
obviously high-speed internet and cell phone towers are going to be needed for all constituents here in York-Simcoe. I think the most important thing is obviously going to be infrastructure, but more important than that, I think we need to also maintain net neutrality. One of the conservative plans that have been mentioned here is that they want to take away your net neutrality, which means that they want to charge you for every minute that you're on the internet. They want to charge you for every site that you visit. This is something that I don't think is fair to the Canadians here, especially in York-Simcoe. So I think that a vote for the Greens is a vote away from the Conservatives.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davidson.
High-speed internet is a huge issue. Small business, students, and seniors access the world through the internet. And there's thousands of home-based small businesses that rely on the web too. I live in the rural part of Georgina, and right now my internet bill is in excess of $350 and climbing, especially with this campaign. And basically we have people that are in the towns paying unlimited internet prices, and the rural people are actually subsidizing the people in the towns, and this is unacceptable. So we have to work with private sector providers to make sure that we get a reliable and reasonably priced internet service throughout the riding of York-Simcoe. And if elected, I will work with my colleagues from across rural Ontario to come up with a plan that will work for the providers and all people of York-Simcoe.
Thank you. Mr. Gertz.
The People's Party of Canada wants to deregulate and possibly even decommission the CRTC. What we need is competition. Listen, a typical plan, maybe at the high end, runs about $150 a month for gigabytes. To go beyond that, you then have to pay $5 per gigabyte. So the problem is that every family is now rationing. The families that I talk to are rationing the use to the internet. And the problem with that is it causes the students to now have to bypass lectures or worry about how much they're going to cost, and mom and dad then have to then cough up more money. So the answer is deregulation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tanaka.
Here. So high-speed internet is an essential service for everyday life, and the Liberal Party recognizes that. So the Liberal government has created a rural economic development ministry. Minister Bernadette Jordan, in her mandate letter, high-speed internet and bringing that to areas, rural areas like York-Simcoe, is top of mind, and investments are coming. We also have the Connect to Innovate Fund to make sure that there is even more money that will speed up the process. I want to be the voice that goes to Ottawa and works alongside Minister Bernadette Jordan and make sure that that funding comes back to York-Simcoe, that we get a slice of that investment right here to all the people that deserve that in York-Simcoe.
Thank you. Jessica McLean.
I started. I don't need to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're right. Okay, on to the next question then. And I'm going to ask Matthew Lund to start off for us. Small businesses are the economic engines that are driving prosperity in this community. What would you do as a federal MP to ensure these small business enterprises continue to thrive?
Well, again, I think supporting the Chamber of Commerce is going to be one of the primary things that we need to do. I think that we also need, as we said, tax cuts to the payroll taxes, but we also need to have tax cuts for the middle class and the working class, and tax the ultra-rich instead. Instead of taxing the small business owners, let's tax the major corporations, the oil lobby. We are here, we're the party who has the answers on the jobs of today and tomorrow, the infrastructure needed today and tomorrow. Greens will invest in high-paying permanent jobs in the innovation economy. We'll be building up our economy in areas where Canada already leads the world, like artificial intelligence and software development.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Davidson.
Small business, we have to now create an environment where we have to cut red tape. And what do I mean by that? When I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people, people are taking 2 years to get permits to build things. I had one farmer told me it took him 4 years to get a permit to build his house. And and his barn. These are the things where if we cut red tape, and that doesn't mean circumventing any environmental rules. When you have to go to the town or the Conservation Authority and move through the chain of permits, we need to speed that process up. It is the only way in this world we are going to become more efficient. The process has to be speed up. This is a competitive world, and I really feel we're following behind the curve, and small business needs that support.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Gertz.
The People's Party of Canada is committed to lowering taxes. We have an exact number. Unlike my colleagues here at the table, we are going to reduce everyone's personal tax to 15% for the first $100,000 with a $15,000 tax exemption built in. So the first $15,000 is tax-free. Then the next $85,000 is at 15%. That's your personal income tax. After that, from $100,000 on, it would be 25%. That's how you stimulate small business. Now, for the corporate small business tax, we're going to drop it from 15% to 10%. That's how you put small business ahead.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tanaka.
So the Liberal government has made a commitment to small businesses, and we've delivered on that commitment. We have lowered the small business tax rate from 11% down to 9%. And what does that mean? That means that local businesses right here in York-Simcoe have more money to grow that business. And when they have more money for their business, they can do things like raise the wages for the people they employ, create good, new, well-paying jobs right here in York-Simcoe. So it's the Liberal Party who have made a commitment to small business owners and who have delivered results.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get some specifics. The NDP is actually committed to doing things to help small business. We want to hard cap those credit card fees that unfairly go against small businesses. We want to lower business tax even further. We know they're the backbones of our economies, especially here in York-Simcoe. And we want to end the taxes that make it hard for you guys to pass those businesses down to the next generation. But overall, and I can't emphasize this enough, when we bring everybody up, we all benefit from this. How we're really going to help small businesses is we're going to increase the purchasing power of our entire community. A lot of people only have the means to pay for the essentials. That means they're not contributing back to the economy in the way that they could. And in terms of cutting red tape, we've seen what that means here in Ontario in terms of Bill 66. We can't go there. We cut corners, bad things happen. Ask Walkerton.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Lund was first. You wanted to make a comment?
I wanted to just make a comment about red tape, but I think that she kind of hit it on the head here a little bit. You know, when you cut red tape, you know, we had an outbreak this summer of Ebola with romaine lettuce. Sure, that came from the States, but it also came from cutting red tape. When you cut a lot of red tape, you know, it might sound nice and sexy on a platform, but in reality, you eventually realize why you had the red tape in the first place to begin with.
Okay, and I think Ms. Tanaka was next.
So I just want to say that I agree with Jessa with saying that we need to be able to contribute back to the economy by putting more money in the pockets of the people here in York-Simcoe. And that's what the Liberal Party is doing. By giving the Canada Child Benefit to families right here in York-Simcoe, 20,000 children here in York-Simcoe rely on that. It's money that goes back into the pockets of families and allows them to use it how they best see fit, whether that's for nutritious food, whether that's hockey practice, whether that's art lessons, and it's going and supporting those local businesses right here in York-Simcoe. So I agree, and it's the Liberal Party who's delivering that result.
Thank you. Scott Davidson next.
And just rebuttal to that though, but the Liberal Party they have cut the income splitting. They've cut the TFSAs. So these are things that haven't helped. We have people that we want to get out in sports, and they've cut the child sports tax credit. They've cut the taxes for textbooks.
Okay, thank you, Jessa. I think you were next.
I just want to point out, we talk about how many people rely on the child tax benefit like that's a good thing. I mean, the benefit is a good thing, but the fact that they rely on it is not. We can't wait for employers to bring up the cost of living of our workers. We have to take steps to do that ourselves. It's not the benevolence of big companies that's going to do it.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Lake Simcoe is an important natural feature, and its health is important to the residents of this riding. Please tell us what you would do to ensure that Lake Simcoe will receive priority consideration by your government. And the first one to address this will be Scott Davidson.
Thank you. I've been born and raised in York-Simcoe and grown up on the lake my whole life and worked on the lake. And the lake is very important to me. And under a conservative government, we will work hard to bring back the Lake Simcoe Cleanup Fund that was cut by the Liberal government. Lake Simcoe is very important to small business, to all residents of York-Simcoe, and we want to make sure that it is clean and healthy for years to come.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gertz, would you like to address this topic?
The People's Party of Canada, as I said in my opening address, it's concerned about the financial crisis we're in. Here's the problem. You can't have 3 levels of government on every issue. That's what's making everything screwed up, okay? What happens is you have everybody pointing fingers and no one's held accountable, all right? For example, New Brunswick right now is having a terrible fiasco over the Francophone Games. I hope you'll all Google that when you get home, okay? The bottom line is, we're all environmentalists. We all want the lakes to be clean. We all drink and recreational by the lakes. But the bottom line is, we can't be there for everything. So what we need to do is hold the provinces accountable. And Scott's right about one thing. You can't have cuts that you were counting on.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tanaka.
Okay, so I'm going to say this so that it's very clear. The Liberals did not cut the Lake Simcoe Cleanup Fund. I just have to be very clear about that. It was set to expire before the Liberals even took government. But we do recognize, I grew up in this riding. I want my children to enjoy Lake Simcoe the same way I did as a child. So in order to do that, we need to address the biggest threat that there is to Lake Simcoe, and that's climate change. We've also, and that's what the Liberal Party is proposing, is that we need to address climate change. We have also put substantial investments into Lake Simcoe through the Nature Fund, as well as the Great Lakes Fund. So there is funding that exists that will help preserve our waterways, our rivers that flow into Lake Simcoe, and the health and cleanliness of this treasure right here in our riding.
Thank you very much.
So, of course we need to clean up the lake. I think we all can acknowledge that, but we need to be focused in our approach. We can't just simply throw money at another fund without oversight, without coordination, and without a real plan to stop further contamination. I mean, we've done the studies, we've identified all of the sources, so let's not just create another fund, let's do something so we don't have to keep revisiting this issue. Environment Canada has a real role to play in all of this. We need to strengthen that agency, and we also should be utilizing local initiatives that provide the opportunity for jobs as well as creativity here to clean up the lake. The federal government has a huge role to play in protecting our entire environment, including the lake, and it was a role taken seriously for some time. But under Harper, the Conservatives decimated water protections, and under Liberal rule, only 62 rivers and 97 lakes remain under federal protection. This is how our lakes get polluted in the first place.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lund.
I don't think that any of the parties up here could disagree with the fact that if it comes to a fact of environmental issues, there's no party that's stronger than the Green Party on environmental issues, and specific to that is Lake Simcoe. When you look at a problem like this, you got to look at the root cause, and that's something that the Green Party always does. And one of the root causes to the pollution in Lake Simcoe is the fact that the company and many corporations are allowed to dump in Lake Simcoe, and there's no accountability for it. So one of the things we got to do is stop the corporations from being able to dump chemicals chemicals, hazardous chemicals that pollute the natural resource that is Lake Simcoe. So that is one of the main fundamentals, and then obviously cleanup is then second.
Thank you very much. We're on to the next question, and we'll address this question to start. Mr. Gertz, what are some of the ways you would leverage support from the federal government so our communities can capitalize on Ontario's $34 billion tourism industry?
Tourism is a backbone for this area, but the problem, again, over and over again, you can't have 3 levels of government for everything. The way to enhance tourism is to get off the backs of everybody so that you can stimulate your own economy. Basically, we need to generate the millennials to come up with their own solutions to our own local problems. If we do that, if we reinvigorate the millennials to think in the terms of, well, I can go out and start a business, or I can do this, and the government isn't in my way, then you can get ahead. The way to do it is for us to follow with Maxime Bernier's solution of get government out of your life so that you can focus on what you need to do for yourselves.
Ms. Tanaka?
We're really fortunate in York-Simcoe to have Lake Simcoe as a tourism hub right here in the riding. And the Lake Simcoe depends on small businesses thriving. We have lowered the small business tax from 11% to 9%. That allows local businesses that surround the lake in order to create new jobs, increase wages, and have more money to increase tourism and development here at the lake. But the greatest threat to the lake is environmental degradation and climate change. If there is no lake, then there is no tourism. So we as Liberals know that you can protect the environment and grow the economy.
Thank you.
So as a community organizer, I know my biggest asset is my community. And so in terms of harnessing that money for our tourism industry, we need to work with the community and hear all of their great ideas. We need to hear from small business owners on how we can get main streets thriving again. We need to hear ideas from residents on where we might be lacking. And that's really my strong point. I listen to people. I don't make decisions ahead of time. And I know where I don't know the best answer. So I would seek it from my community. And I think a lot of you have some great ideas on how we can grow tourism here. But by far, it will involve cleaning up that lake and improving our environment. But I think we can be really innovative and harness some of those funds. But I'll need your help.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lund.
Preserving this environment here is key to being able to have tourism. If you have no place to go, then you're not going to have any tourism. So preservation, keeping Lake Simcoe clean, that's going to be number one. Number two is obviously going to be incentivizing small business in the area. So the more you can incentivize small businesses to come, event promoters to come, different things to come to our community, the more incentivization plans you can offer them, obviously, the more tourism will grow in this sector.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. Tourism is very important to me, and I've actually been in the tourist business. And I think it's important in York-Simcoe that we promote our great hotels that we have here, and also our winter activities, and let people know that we have things that happen 12 months a year, and support that. And I would support any investment in tourism and reach out.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next question. This one comes from our audience this evening. Many millennials feel they are being left out of the job and housing market. What do you say to that? And we will give that question to Ms. Tanaka to start.
Okay, so I understand that concern. I'm raising 2 boys myself, and so I understand that need for jobs. But it is the Liberal government who is making sure that we look after the future generations. We have created 800,000 new jobs since the Liberals formed government. We have a historic low of unemployment rate. It's the lowest rate we've seen in 40 years. We also support millennials by job skills training, by investing in them and the skills that they need, and clean tech jobs that will be the jobs of the future. We also have Canada Summer Grants. We also are supporting Ontario grants and Canada Summer Grants in order to make sure that they have those investments in the younger generation. But it's the Liberal government who has shown investments and grown the economy.
Thank you. Justin, thank you.
So if we only listen to all the great things that the Liberals have done, we might forget that it's not just millennials that are having trouble entering the housing market or getting jobs. It's almost everybody. And so what we need to do is address affordable housing, and the NDP is the only party that has a plan that even comes remotely close to solving that crisis. One of the things will help young buyers get into the housing market is to double the first-time buyer's tax credit. That will help get some of the kids out of the house, right? But we can't just turn a blind eye and pretend that all of the grants and funds that we've put out there aren't leaving us in distress. This riding has one of the worst rates for affordable housing in Ontario. 30 to 50% of us over 50% of us are spending 30 to 50% on our housing. That means we are precariously housed, all of us, renters and homeowners. Everything is not as the Liberals would make it seem.
Toronto was recently rated the fastest growing market for tech jobs in the world, and we need to invest in our workforce so we have the skills in Canada to fill those jobs. You know, one of the things that the Greens advocate for is the carbon tax that the Conservative government has fought so hard against. That carbon tax that is so controversial actually goes to developing new job growth and new technology for the future. One of the other aspects in terms of affordable housing is how are students supposed to be able to pay for a first-time house when they come out of university, what, 30, 40, 60, 80, $100,000 in debt? It's unreasonable to think that somebody could buy a house or even start a business when they're coming out of college with so much debt. So we need to fix those problems right away.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson, please.
Thank you. Affordable housing, and we need to encourage private sector developers to build homes and units that are suitable for low-income people. And if we need to, provide top-up payments as well to make sure tenants can cover the rent, and we should look at a program like that. Housing affordability for first-time home buyers is also an issue that we are addressing. There are many young people who have the income to handle a mortgage payment but just can't manage the down payment together because of the crushing burden of increasing taxes and the new mortgage rules. We need to look at this and the rules and change this accordingly to help first-time home buyers.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gertz.
When it comes to government statistics and government creation of jobs, poppycock. The bottom line is this. People, the jobs that are out there are soft jobs. You all know it, okay? They're part-time, they're suffering from wage stagnation, they're contract positions. They parade these statistics out, and they're manufactured statistics. And the bottom line is that the only way we can really help the millennials is come up with solutions that they will create for themselves. One really good solution I heard, which was really exciting, was millennials buy houses with corporations, half and half. What a brilliant idea. They pay half price for a house, and they don't have to put a down payment down.
Thank you very much. I'm told we have one more question for all of you before we go to break. And so I will ask Jessa McLean to address the next questions first. The dairy sector contributes $20.9 billion to the economy and employs 40,000 Canadians, not to mention ag industry players such as processors, machinery dealers, and feed companies. The industry is reeling from huge losses negotiated away in trade deals and misinformation that was promoted to the public when the new Canada Food Guide was announced. What is your position on the serious issues facing over 11,000 family dairy farms in Canada today? And Jessa, if you would go first, please.
Yep. So of course we have to completely support all of our farmers, but our dairy farmers have been particularly hit by bad deals signed by the Liberal government. The Conservatives will criticize these deals, but they typically placate to the same parties when going into multi-trade agreements. So I'm not sure we can expect anything better from them. What we need to do is encourage co-ops. That is going to help our agricultural industry thrive and the people in it. We can, in terms of the food guide, it is what it is in terms of dietary. I mean, these are evidence-based policy ideas, but it doesn't mean we stop supporting our dairy farmers. If need be and subsidies need, we step in and we do that like we've done for farmers in the past.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lund.
So agriculture obviously is number one, one of the most important sectors of our economy, but more than that, it's how we survive. And if we don't actually harness this, this sector of our population, then we're not going to be able to have milk. So obviously keeping regulations clean for them to be able to produce, and also keeping an environment safe for them to operate. But I think that the most important thing is we can't keep going back to business as usual. You know, the Conservatives get elected, they repeal everything the Liberals do. Liberals get elected, they repeal everything the Conservatives do. We got to stop that. It's time for new blood in Ottawa. We need to change things right away.
Thank you very much. Scott.
Well, I support dairy farmers wholeheartedly, and I support supply management. And let's face it, at the end of the day, farmers feed cities. You know, when you look at it, when you look at Canada, you know, a plant like General Motors can move, but you can't move a farm. And it's very important that we realize that and support our farming industry in Canada, and especially in York-Simcoe, and grow it into a world-class thing. This is one thing that Canada, if you look at it, we can actually thrive in the farming industry and become number one and support that industry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gertz.
We all support our farmers. And yes, the farmers are the ones who create the cities. There's no doubt about that. But the problem is, do you want us to be hypocrites? That's what the problem is in Ottawa, okay? And then they start lying to us, okay? The reality is the dairy situation is a cartel, okay? And if we're going to allow the cartel for the dairy industry, then look out, it'll be the banks and everybody else afterwards. And that's why we're worried about your homes, because who's going to pay that $1.1 trillion debt in less than 20 years? They're coming after our homes.
Thank you very much. Sean.
I grew up in this riding, so in a rural part of this community. So I have an understanding of what agriculture means beyond just to the economy, but to our communities. But it's the Liberals who support supply management and dairy farmers. Let's not forget that it was the Conservatives, 50% of Conservatives supported a leader that was ready to kick dairy farmers to the curb in a blind faith commitment to supply management. But it was Canadians, and it was the Liberal government who stood up to the US when they wanted to flood our market with an inferior product. It was the Liberal government who stood up for supply management and for our dairy farmers. And so that's something that I'm proud of.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, can I do a rebuttal?
Yes.
So I just want to actually go back to the last question, because we didn't have a chance to address that, where the NDP said that they were the only party that was addressing the housing market. That's simply not true. The Liberal Party is the first party to have a national housing strategy. Right here in York-Simcoe, we have delivered 800,000 to affordable housing in Georgina alone. I know that there's more to do. Of course there's more to do. And I want to be that progressive voice in Ottawa that advocates for that money, that much needed money for affordable housing right here.
Okay. And I think Jessica McLean would like to speak to that.
Yeah, just in response, the Liberal government did make a lot of promises in 2015, but as we'll see with most of the promises that they made in the last election, they have not fulfilled them. If you look on their website, beside the tax incentives that were there to encourage affordable housing, a promise they had made explicitly, it says not being pursued. That's really what they do with most of the promises during election time.
Okay, thank you very much. We're coming up to break, and thank you so much for the first half. I think you've done a great job. We're going to take a station break now for a few minutes, but please don't go too far away. We'll be back shortly with our panel of candidates, so stay tuned for more issues and more debate.
Program is brought to you by Rogers Anyplace TV. Enjoy exclusive content for free. Visit RogersAnyplaceTV.com.
For Sir George Etienne Cartier, the work of uniting Canada was as vast as the country itself. First, he won over Quebec.
Union is the only way forward.
No, Monsieur Cartier. Confederation will cost French Canadians their nationality.
Monsieur, together we will form a political nationality independent of our origins.
Diversity will be Canada's strength.
Then he fought for Manitoba.
The Northwest has formed a government under Louis Riel. We will not join Confederation unless our rights are respected.
So you want a new province? Then you'll have it. There will be a place for your people in Canada.
He envisioned a country from Atlantic to Pacific.
British Columbia won't even think of joining Canada without a wagon road through the Rockies.
Ask for a railway. We are building a country, after all.
Bold as a lion, Confederation could not have happened but for him. Le Canada, son pays, ses amours.
In 10, 9, 8.
Lucas Bouchard, at your service.
7, 6, 5.
Nathan Grant.
Are you our new Mountie?
Yes, ma'am.
4, 3, 2, 1. Celebration.
They served to protect our homes. Now many are homeless. They fought for our way of life. Now many are fighting personal battles of their own. They answered the call for our country. Now we honor them by serving our communities. Help us help Canada's veterans. Become a Legion member today.
On the next Georgina Life, we're going to discover Georgina.
Valentine treats with Brooke Monks.
Getting gorgeous with Jagged Edge Hair Salon.
All this and so much more on the next Georgina Life on Rogers TV.
Good evening and welcome back to the York-Simcoe federal by-election all candidates debate. I'm Jennifer Anderson, Executive Director of the Georgina Chamber of Commerce. The Georgina Chamber is thrilled to be hosting this evening's debate in partnership with Rogers TV Georgina. If you're tuning in at home or tuning in online, you are watching as a result of Rogers TV Georgina. Thank you so much for watching and becoming an informed voter. I'd now like to reintroduce our moderator for this evening. She is the editor and founder of the Georgina Post, as well as the host of Politically Speaking on Rogers TV Georgina. Please extend a warm welcome once again to Karen Wolf.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, we're going into the second hour of our discussions. And the first question we have is going to be for, who have we got? Matthew Lund. So Matthew, if you would start, with all the talk about climate change, how will your party address and fund the issue?
Well, carbon tax has got to be number one. We have to have that implemented. There's a lot of talk about how it's going to kill the economy. Well, BC has had a carbon tax since 2007. They have the 17% growth of their GDP over the last 15 years, and while net emissions have declined 4.7%. So carbon tax has got to be number one. I think the big issue is that we have to address the Paris Climate Accord within the next 2 years. If we do not address it within the next 2 years, parts of the world are going to become uninhabitable. Parts of the world like Asia. And that's going to leave us close to 1 billion refugees over the next, 1 billion environmental refugees over the next 10 years. So I think it's time that we act now instead of worrying about the repercussions later.
Thank you very much. Scott Davidson.
Thank you. Let me be very clear. I believe that climate change is real, and we must take it seriously. My leader has made it very clear that her plan for dealing with this issue of climate change will be released in plenty of time for the voters to decide on a practical plan to fight climate change. Now, many of you will turn and say, or the Liberals will turn and say, we have a plan for climate change. What they have is a tax plan. This is a scheme that's going to increase the price of all goods throughout the economy. It is going to be a job killer, this tax plan. And then they're going to roll $300 back to you. For the average family, cost of an average family, things could go up by $1,000. So everyone is going to be short $700. So this is not a climate plan, it is a tax plan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gertz.
Our carbon footprint worldwide is 1.6% of what the world puts out. The carbon tax is a killer. It's going to kill jobs. It's the worst thing that can happen. But let's assume for a moment that you decide it's the right thing to do. Then so be it. Ontario and BC should be allowed to have it if you think it. What you shouldn't have is the federal government coming in and dictating to the province of all 10 provinces and territories about who should be having the carbon tax. The environment is precious, but if we go with this carbon tax, all we're going to be doing is subsidizing the billionaires in China who are burning coal as their major source of energy. So the reality is, it's a burden on the millennials that is unjustified. But if you want it, okay, but let's not have the feds dictate.
Ms. Tanaka.
I'm a mom. I'm raising 2 kids in this riding. I am not prepared to kick this can further down the road and leave it for future generations to take, for them to take it on. This is something that we have to take action on now. And we have put a price on pollution. Why have we made people pay for pollution? Because if pollution is free, you have more pollution. But the plan that the Liberal government has put forth puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 families. And it's also money that they will get up front so they can adjust to this new reality that we are facing. And it's also something in York-Simcoe, well, they will get a rural top-up to make sure that we adjust to it here in a rural riding. When people don't reveal what their plan is, we've seen provincially what that could mean. But it's the Liberal Party who has a plan to protect the environment and grow the economy.
Thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
So all the fear-mongering we're going to hear about this carbon tax, it's really just a distraction from the fact that the Conservatives aim to do absolutely nothing about climate change. Andrew Scheer has not made it clear about anything in terms of prioritizing our environment. Polluters have to pay for the damage, but let's not get caught up on the carbon tax. We need a just transition to renewable energy, and we need it now. And you know how we're not going to pay for it? By buying pipelines. So we're, instead of offering $3 billion of fossil fuel subsidies a year, we can take royalties from oil extraction and use it to fund these new innovative energy sectors that don't all have to be in Alberta, right? We can bring those jobs here to York-Simcoe. It's really short-sighted to be thinking about a campaign platform and to wait to release any kind of plans around climate change. So let's do something now, and let's be bold about it, because we have been told, the reports have told us, there's no time to spare. We can't wait 4 more years to make sure the Liberals keep true on their promises, and we know the Conservatives will not be champions for the environment. We have seen what they've done here in Ontario with removing the Environmental Commissioner and Bill 66.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lund, I think you wanted to respond to something you heard.
Absolutely. She said it exactly. You can't have this fear-mongering that says that the carbon tax is going to kill jobs and kill the economy. The place where it is actually shown to be effective in British Columbia has the strongest GDP growth in Canada. That's a remarkable fact. Okay. Now, are the Conservatives saying that people in Ontario are not as smart as the people in British Columbia? Of course not. People in Ontario are just as talented, just as smart, and we have just as much opportunity to take that carbon tax, and instead of giving money to rich corporate oil companies and to the big corporations, we take that money and give it into small business, into sectors of growth and technology for the future, not the past. Regressive Conservative, I think, more than progressive.
Okay.
We will have we will have a environmental plan that will be released, and you'll have plenty of time to review it.
Okay, will it be reviewed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer or by an Environmental Commissioner?
We'll see what happens, but you'll have plenty of time.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question. I'm going to ask Scott Davidson to take this one on first. What would you do to help ensure that pipelines are constructed to transport Canada's oil reserves to market so all Canadians can prosper?
Under a Conservative government, we would just build them. We need pipelines to move oil from west to the coast. And we had a current Liberal government, as usual, that is behind the curve, that should have had the pipeline built. We have people in Alberta right now that are reeling. 1/3 of the commercial buildings are vacant out west right now. We have a Prime Minister currently that is creating an east-west divide. People out west want to work. Fossil fuels in the short term, unfortunately, are not going anywhere. However, we have to get our product to market, and we have to be willing to work with each other to get that done safely and efficiently. It is a must. So, and we have to reach out to First Nations in those areas if they would like to partner with those projects so that we can all be successful across the world and in Canada. And we cannot have crude moving by rail.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gertz.
Pipelines are very helpful, but we can't go around dictating. The BC people have the right to run a responsible pipeline through their properties. But you know who's best to decide that? Alberta and BC. Let them get together and put together a plan that they can live with, that will both look after Alberta and BC. Again, the federal government coming in and dictating and running roughshod. How would we like it if basically BC becomes bigger than us and they start coming in and telling us how to run our tourism, our water, everything else because they're smarter than us? The reality is we just need to allow the provinces to occupy their proper constitutional jurisdiction. The environment is a provincial domain. Let's start with the pipelines going through and make them and the millennials come up with brilliant solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Macca.
So Scott Davidson's comment of "we'll just build them" when it comes to this pipeline is precisely why we don't have a pipeline. The Liberal government inherited a flawed system. The Conservative, Harper Conservative government fumbled that. We inherited this flawed system. It had to go to the Federal Court of Appeal, who supported the decision that it needed to go back to review. And we also needed to consult our Indigenous partners and be able to do this in a constructive and respectful way that respects their land rights, as well as an environmental review process, that you can't simply do that. But it's the Liberal government who wants to bring these resources to market, that has a plan to move that forward, but it's going to be a plan that protects the environment while growing the economy.
Thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
Okay, so in short, we're not going to build any more pipelines. That oil needs to stay in the ground. We need to look to the future. I think the short-term thinking is really evident in Mr. Davidson's comment that we just need to get the product to the market, and in the short term, it's it's really inconvenient that we have fossil fuels. Well, that's not the attitude that we need, that our children need, that the next generations need, right? We need to be bold now. And second, just going to build them and to make this as though it's a choice between the environment or Alberta jobs, that's just a false narrative, right? We know that when we invest in a renewable sector, we're going to create even more jobs, well-paying jobs, and the NDP has a very clear plan to transition while supporting workers and their families. This doesn't have to be between jobs or the environment. That is more fear-mongering to stop us from doing something meaningful.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lund.
So the Liberal government spent $4.5 billion to buy this current pipeline, and they plan to spend at least another $10 billion more in the pipeline over the next 10 years. This is going to create no more than 50 permanent jobs in British Columbia and no more than 40 permanent jobs in Alberta. Then we're just going to sell it back to some private investor that just wants to have that back, right? We need to be moving away. Like the NDP said, we need to be moving away from fossil fuels. We need to start transitioning right away. You take a look right here in Ontario, General Motors collapsed despite all the Conservative bailouts. All right, we need to be developing infrastructure today to move towards clean energy vehicles. That has got to be number one on any platform heading into the future.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Davidson.
Just in response to Jessa, your leader, Mr. Singh, supports the LNG gas pipeline. Your other new candidate doesn't support it in Burnaby South, which is Sven Robinson, who wants to run. So we're not quite sure. Do you support pipelines?
I do not support pipelines. I made that perfectly clear in my initial statement, but thank you for bringing that up.
All right, but we all actually have pipelines. We have natural gas. And what I'm saying about fossil fuels are, in the short term, this is the reality that we're using that. You have a pipeline in your backyard. If you don't like a pipeline, you can shut off your natural gas. But people don't have viable choice right now.
I think we need to build the infrastructure for a reasonable choice and stop having just the incremental change.
I think Ms. Tanaka was next.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to say that I agreed with the Green candidate that it does have to be a transition, but it's the Liberal government who's making sure that those necessary investments in infrastructure are there. We have to make this as a gradual transition into green energy and green tech jobs. But it is a transition that the Liberal Party is prepared to see from the supplying and bringing our resources to market and moving towards clean, renewable energies.
Okay, thank you. Jess McLean.
It's hard to believe that the Liberals are behind a transition when they're buying pipelines. In fact, they paid $1 billion more for the pipeline than it was worth, and they're making promises to compensate future owners of that pipeline for any delays in building it. And to Mr. Davidson's comment, what simplistic thinking it is to try to fool voters that the backyard pipelines that we have are any way comparable to the crude oil that we will be shipping across Indigenous lands. I think voters see right through that.
No. What voters see is we're shipping. Western Canadians have gotten together and they're shipping crude by rail. Is that safer? Would you rather them ship it by rail?
Is this open up to just questions?
No. Mr. Lund is next.
Were the Indigenous communities consulted or even asked for their opinions when the pipeline was created?
there was many Indigenous communities that want to be a part of this. They
some do, but have all of them been consulted?
Yes, they have.
Every one of them.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Thank you very much. This question is going to be directed to Mr. Gertz to answer first. The rising death toll and debilitating effects associated with substance abuse is a growing problem in Canadian society. What solutions can you offer that would result in a positive impact on people's lives who are dealing with substance abuse?
Drug addiction, whether it be with pharmaceuticals or illicit drugs, is a real problem. We know that the pharmaceutical companies have been, let's say, profiting from over-the-counter drugs that people have become addicted to. Is the criminal law the solution? No, it's not. It's a healthcare issue, but we also have to recognize it's an expensive one. And the question is, how are we going to pay for it? Is this a federal problem? I'm not sure it is. I think it's one that each province has to deal with as they see fit. Let's face it, the opioid problem that may be in BC is different than it may be in Toronto. The reality is, how do we deal with it? Do the feds come in and come with a PAN program again, another thing that we're going to have to pay for? Or do we say, listen, these drugs and the addictions that follow are a provincial domain, let's deal with it.
Thank you. Ms. Tanaka.
I think obviously that if this is a crisis, which it is, and whether or not it's in another province or here, it's a Canadian-wide issue and it's a tragedy, right? We don't want people dying from drug addiction and from addictions to fentanyl. So one thing that we have to make sure is that it's not coming through our borders and strengthening our borders. And it's the Liberal government who has put money towards strengthening those borders to make sure that it's not coming through. Bill Blair is somebody that we've consulted with to make sure that we are empowering local police and local law enforcement to make sure that these drugs aren't making it into communities like York-Simcoe. But I think in terms of coming up with productive ways of addressing this issue of addiction and drug addiction, we're going to have to work with our community partners, and you need somebody that's able to work collaboratively, not only with our provincial partners, but as well as our municipal partners, our nonprofits, to make sure that this is addressed. And I'd love to be that progressive voice in Ottawa.
Thank you. Ms. McLean.
So yes, this is a growing crisis in a lot of our communities, and yes, it is the federal government's problem. It's all of our problem. But we need to start looking at all avenues out there to fight the opioid crisis that's killing thousands. But the use of the justice system isn't the answer. That's not how we treat addiction, right? We are severely underfunding mental health treatment in this province, and we're doing it because the federal government hasn't been champions in terms of health care. We simply give money over to the provinces and they can decide what they do to it. We need targeted transfers that dictate that certain mental health treatment is prioritized along with pharmacare. But yeah, filling our prisons with addicts is not the solution. We need to look at safe injection sites. We need to look at the naloxone kits that are being handed out, and actually all avenues and all levels of government have a role to play in this.
Thank you. And Matthew Lund.
The NDP's position and the Green Party's position on this issue is pretty similar. In the last year, in 2018, 4,000 people across Canada died of all drugs, including pharmaceuticals, opioids, cocaine, you name it. That's contrast against more than 10,000 people that died of alcohol-related incidences and more than 100,000 people that died of tobacco-related illness. So instead of spending and throwing money against this to be a criminal issue and trying to, fight the war on drugs, we need to spend that money on healthcare. We need to develop plans and strategies where this is going to be an issue dealt with mental health care and transfer payments directly to the hospitals instead of just letting the provinces do what they want with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. I think this is something we can all agree on. I mean, alcoholism and drug addiction has touched many families, some families in this room, and it is a tragedy. And I think we have to invest in Education for sure. Education is very important, and I think it starts right at the family. And it is a federal problem, and we have to get the funds to help everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is I'm going to ask Ms. Tanaka to start, and the question is, does your party have a plan to incorporate pharmacare into Canada's existing Medicare system? Please explain.
Well, I think one of the main things is if people need medication and prescriptions for their health, then yes, we should make sure that we come up with a plan to provide that for people. One of the first steps, though, is the Liberal government has created a national advisory committee on finding out what are the best steps in terms of putting together that plan. And so we've taken that first step of creating the advisory committee, but know that obviously the Liberal government wants to make sure that all Canadians are cared for, not only with our National Health Accord, but in a commitment to pharmacare. And this is the first step that we've taken. There's more to do. And I want to make sure that I advocate for the people here in York-Simcoe so that everybody does get the prescriptions in order for to maintain their health.
Thank you very much. Jess McLean, please.
So yeah, we all know someone that's cutting their pills in half or can't pay for their medication. If you talk to pharmacists, this is a real problem. 10% of us don't have coverage, so we need to fix that gap now. We don't need any more studies. We all know that we need pharmacare. We know because we go for jobs that provide these benefits, but we need to acknowledge that precarious labor force, that's not a reality for everybody anymore. And if the Liberals or the Conservatives were really committed to doing pharmacare, we've had them in power for decades. If this isn't news, this is something we need now. We don't need any more studies. And the trade agreements signed by the Liberals make it even more difficult for us to cover prescription drugs because they increase the patents for pharmaceutical companies. So this is, again, them kowtowing to big business. Their plans for pharmacare do preference insurance companies, and that's really not a solution. And I do need to remind you that this was a promise that they've made before, and they did not keep.
Thank you very much. Matthew Lund.
Preventative health care versus reactive health care is one of the most important pillars of the Green Party. We have a fully costed plan to implement health care, including pharmacare, nationwide. That is going to be one of the main cores of the Green Party. Having said that, you know, I think it's a travesty here in Canada that people have to decide between cancer medication and their mortgage payment. How is that even rational here in Canada? I don't think any Canadian should have to suffer with a decision like that. It should be obvious. Pharmacare should be universal right across Canada. And again, we have a fully costed plan. We're the only party that is going to have our costed plan under parliamentary budget officer review for the platform.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson, please.
Our party, and I believe at this point, a national universal pharmacare system is much too costly for Canadians at this time, especially with the massive deficit spending by the Liberal government that they've currently engaged in. We have tens of thousands of Canadians that are already covered by their private workplace insurance plans or in their financial position to be able to cover their own drug costs. So this is something that we have to look at very carefully, the cost. Here in Ontario, we currently have 6 drug benefit programs that help low income and seniors pay for their drugs. The Ontario Drug Benefit Program covers all people over 65 for drugs with a very small co-op, which averages out to about $240 a year. We also cover drugs for those on Ontario Works, ODSP, and the Trillium Drug Program for low-income earners.
Till Doug Ford cuts it all.
Thank you very much. Ms. McLean?
I'm just, to the cost, I want to remind you that we do find the money when it comes to, buying pipelines or bailing out big companies. So the money is absolutely there, and he's ignoring the point that Matthew made, that it is actually less costly to provide preventative medicine. Studies that the Liberals have paid for have shown us that it is cheaper to provide pharmacare than to do patchwork. And his comment to all the people that are already covered, yes, we all know that, but are you telling us that it's okay that we leave everyone else behind?
Thank you. Mr. Gertz.
Universal health care, where did it come from? Not the feds. It came from Tommy Douglas, the provinces, all right? That is the solution. The provinces run their healthcare better than the feds ever will. Where are we going to pay for it? Having the federal government decide, okay, for a pan thing, it's just inviting us to really create another lie where they give us nickels and dimes saying, oh, well, we've done this, but it doesn't cover the problem. And then all of a sudden, again, the finger pointing starts all over again of who is shortchanging who. The feds aren't paying us enough to do it. So the reality is, let's leave it with the provinces. Let's let the province find the solution that is compatible with the strength of the private sector as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, and I'm going to ask Jessa McLean to take this first for us. Do you think Canadians should be given a choice when it comes to private or public health care? Please explain your answer.
No, because you're only giving that, to summarize, no, you're only giving that choice to the rich, right? That's not a choice most of us have to pay for medications. If you've ever had to see the bill for your doctor's visit, you would know how much that costs. So that's not an option for most of us. We do not prioritize our health care based on wealth. We actually need to push back against the privatization of our healthcare system that's being threatened here in Ontario right now. And the federal government can do that, again, by targeted transfers that explicitly say that we will not have a two-tier health system. And I know we've all been in a place where maybe we waited too long or the services weren't what we expected, but that's a design. That's what they do. They underfund these systems so that they become so intolerable, so inefficient, that we look to the private sector. But again, that's an option we know most of us don't have. So no, we cannot allow the privatization of our health care. Absolutely not.
Thank you. Mr. Lund. Thank you. Mr. Lund, please. Thank you.
I couldn't have said it any better. The NDP has got it right on the head. We cannot be sitting there worrying about private health care. We can't afford it. Sure, the 1%ers might be able to afford it, but the rest of us, normal Canadians, cannot afford that. We need to be able to focus on a plan that benefits all Canadians, not just that 1%.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davidson.
I'm not a 1%er. Healthcare is the primary responsibility of the provincial government. Although the federal government provides large amounts of transfer of money to the province to help cover these costs. I believe myself in a universal healthcare system that will get you and your family the care where they need it. I support the Canada Health Act.
Thank you. Mr. Gertz.
It sounds nice that we have this universal healthcare system, but let's face it, the two-tier system is already here, okay? If you have cataracts, then you can go to the front of the line if you have the money. Are we then going to say, well, no, we can't go there because that's going to basically put you back in the lineup and take up a place of someone who needs the benefit of free healthcare? It's already here. What we need to do is be smart about it and say, listen, for those companies that can afford benefits to cover private clinics, to do such things as cataracts or whatever, the situation should be that, okay, go ahead and go to a private clinic. We make more room for the people who can't afford the private plan. It's here, people, who's going to pay for it?
Thank you very much. Mr. Malcolm.
I find it incredibly concerning that the Conservative candidate said that we should leave the strength of our healthcare, our national healthcare system, simply in the hands of our provinces, particularly when there's been more than just hints at privatization. What we need is confidence in a government, like the Liberal government, that will stand up for Canadians regardless of what the provinces do. It is the Liberal government who has created a national health accord. One of the things is a well-funded home care system. And with home care, we allow seniors to stay in their home, to stay independent as long as possible, so that the people who have contributed to our communities, like here in York-Simcoe, are able to stay in their homes and be cared for and not have to be sent to hospital and move away from the communities that they've invested so much in. But it is the Liberal government who will make sure that it takes care of Canadians.
Ms. McLean was first in a rebuttal.
Yes, I want to speak to Mr. Davidson's point there. We don't need empty statements. We didn't get a clear answer from him on whether or not he would stop the privatization of healthcare. So what we need is real leadership on this, not waffling. And it's almost like you're not listening. We tell you, and it's known, the federal government most certainly has a role to play in our healthcare, and we are going to do that with targeted transfers. We cannot leave it for the government of the day to decide what our healthcare is going to look like. We need real leadership, and we need it now.
Okay. Mr. Lund, you were next.
The Conservative go on.
As a Canadian citizen, I don't think that there's anything that I value more about being Canadian than our healthcare system. All right? If we just give that away just for the fact that, oh, it's going to save the 1%ers some money, no, that's not going to be sufficient. We need to be able to tax that 1% so that we can afford increased preventative health care so that we're not depending on... Anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Scott, did you want to respond?
That is one of the founding principles for me of Canada, and we support universal health care for all and not privatizing.
Okay, Ms. Tanaka. Ms. Tanaka's next.
Okay. I'm a little confused because your first statement had said that you would agree with the provinces if they wanted to privatize. So I think what's very clear is we need a strong voice that not only will stand up for York-Simcoe, but can stand up to provincial partners if our healthcare system is under threat. We need a strong progressive voice in Ottawa, and I want to be that voice.
Okay. I'm going to take one more rebuttal on this one, and we'll move on to another question. Mr. Gertz.
Our health care is under threat. That's the problem. It's under terrible threat, and we can't afford it. And with the Liberals running a $19 billion deficit, we're headed towards a $1 trillion debt. Listen, we're all about the environment. Who isn't against for the environment and healthcare? All of us are. But the problem is we've got to pay for it. And when you guys came in, you promised us that you would run a certain deficit, which turned out not to be true. And now the problem is our children are going to pay the price. And we are going to pay the price as soon as we maybe try to sell our house. Okay? The principal resident status is now possibly in jeopardy. Be on guard.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Lund to start us off with this question. How would you balance public safety and security with our desire to be fair and compassionate hosts when welcoming new immigrants to Canada?
Well, obviously, laws are already in place to help with that. And I understand that immigration is a concern in this riding. There's more than 65,000 immigrants that are backlogged right now, and it's constantly becoming an even greater issue. Again, we look towards more to the future. We're worried about immigration today with the 65,000 people that are backlogged today. What about the 1 billion environmental refugees looking down the barrel of 10 years? Our Conservative government's going to say, oh no, they can't come here. United Nations is going to make them come to somewhere. So we have to be, instead of worrying about, like, obviously it's an issue today, but we need to be focusing on what is the problem down the road, and the environmental refugees that we see down the road 10 years, that's going to be a much bigger problem than anything we face today.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Thank you. Immigration, all Canadians we're open to immigrants. That's been a founding principle of Canada from the beginning. And I think the fear-mongering from the other parties about what the Conservatives would do, we're looking to make sure that Canada is protected. We're also looking, if there are illegal border crossers coming in, that we fix that problem. And the spending on illegal border crossings now is upwards of $50 million just in hotel rooms. So I will be knocking on doors and people will ask me, Scott, why are we spending all that money on illegal border crossing hotel rooms when I'm looking for a used wheelchair. So these are the issues that are out there with Canadians right now.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Gertz.
We're all immigrants. I'm a first-generation Canadian. Both my parents are immigrants. So, of course, we're all for, we're all for the same thing. We're all for immigration. The question is, how much can we absorb at once? The People's Party of Canada just wants to go back to 250,000. Right now, the Liberals want to go to 350,000 and maybe more, okay? All we want is that we go back to 250,000, and then we ask the people who come here to embrace us as much as they want us to embrace them. And simply say, listen, we have Canadian values. The Canadian value is simply the rule of law and gender equality. That's what we ask you to respect. So immigration is fine, but we want 250,000 who can help the economy.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tanaka.
I think that's one thing that we have echoed the sentiment, is that Canada is a country that is welcoming of immigrants, and that we recognize that diversity is our strength. My Conservative friend Scott Davidson had mentioned illegal border crossers and the vulnerability of those borders. So it's curious that the Harper Conservatives cut $370 million from border patrols and services. And so it is the Liberal government who has stepped in to make reinvestments to make sure that all Canadians are safe. We those borders secure. But the people that are coming here fleeing war and persecution and terror, we have been a country that is welcoming. But there is a review process. If there is a legitimate claim, then that is something that we will accept people for. We are a warm and welcoming country, but the review process is there for orderly migration.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
Okay, let's not confuse the issue of national security and immigration, right? To call people, human beings, fleeing to seeking asylum through legitimate means illegal is just a means of criminalizing human beings. That's not very Canadian value of us. Studies show that newcomers to Canada actually have the lowest crime rates, and that's the same to most countries. So to suggest anything else is simply scapegoating, and to put the cost of someone's wheelchair versus the hotel cost for an asylum seeker is just a way to pit us against one another. Because like most of our panelists have said, we are all families of immigrants, and there's no way we can let any kind of scare tactics lead us into thinking that the migrants that come today are any different than the neighbors that you already have. They will be contributing factors to our society and our economy. They always have been.
Thank you very much. Next question, I'm going to ask Mr. Davidson to begin. When it comes to the Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action, what steps does the government need to take to deliver on those calls for action?
The calls for action with reconciliation?
Yes.
With Native people?
Yes.
Yes. My wife is actually a First Nations person, and she was a reconciliation officer. I think we always have to be reaching out to First Nations. It's very important that we all work together, and that's something that currently isn't happening enough. Right now, we have to include them in any projects, in anything that's happening, especially in York-Simcoe or anywhere else in Canada. We can't leave things till the last minute. We have to be reaching out and working together at all times with First Nations. It's very important.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gertz?
On reconciliation, it's one of our greatest blights on our complexion. The First Nations were as much our founding fathers as anyone else. Our record for protecting the Indigenous women and reconciling with our failures to them is a burden that we have to put at a top priority. The problem in the world is so often exploitation. Exploitation by one group over another. What we would like to see happen is that be dealt with head on, And the hypocrisy of claiming that we're for First Nations when we're not, or when we don't step up, or we fail them with the Reconciliation Commission, that's a terrible failure on our part. And that is federal jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. Ms. Tanaka.
So we are incredibly fortunate in York-Simcoe to have a First Nations community in the Chippewas of Georgina Island. And I think as a Liberal government, and I think any government, should be embracing that relationship and renewing a commitment of cooperation that's based on respect, that's based on rights, and it's based on a partnership of working together. When I visited the island, I was really moved by the fact that a mom was telling me about the boil water advisory and that they didn't have access to clean water. The Liberal government has lifted 61 boil water advisories, and there has been specific money given to the Chippewas of Georgina Island to that particular effort, as well as to put money towards the investments in structures for childcare and the renovations for those. But we know that there's more to do. Of course there's more to do. And with that consultation process, we'll move forward with that. And I want to be your voice in Ottawa to make sure that we bring home more discussions and more investments.
Okay. Ms. McLean.
So we have to remember reconciliation means there was a healthy relationship to go back to, and I think we need to acknowledge that that's never been. And before we can even talk about moving that way, we need to recognize and address the lack of fundamental rights facing many Indigenous communities, including, like Sean said, the lack of clean drinking water. And if we've lifted 61 boil advisories, then we haven't done enough. If there is one remaining where there is an entire Canadian community without clean drinking water, that's unacceptable. We also have to address the injustices surrounding the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and the over-incarceration of Indigenous people in our prisons. We still have a system that works against Indigenous people, and we can't just simply give tearful apologies and promises that we will listen when we know we violated their unceded treaty rights. We have never really lived up to our treaty obligations, and we know we can't leave that for the Conservative government or the Liberals because they've had their chance and we know our history.
Mr. Lund, please.
Just a quick question, Scott. Do you have a fundamental belief in everything that the Conservatives have said roughly over the last 20 years, at least the federal Conservatives?
Do I have a fundamental belief?
Yes.
Mr. Lund, are you going to
Well, my point is that in 2009, Stephen Harper said that colonialization and persecution against Indigenous people never happened. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't.
Okay. So what we need to do here is we need nation-to-nation building. We need to listen, not tell. We need to work about self-governance for the Indigenous communities. I work with the Indigenous communities of the Chippewas of Rama, and I've done a lot of work with different Indigenous communities over the years. I think it is something that is definitely a fundamental issue of the Green Party. And if for anybody that wants to know more about reconciliation, I recommend that they read Arthur Manuel's Reconciliation Manifesto.
All right, thank you very much. We only have 2 minutes left before we have to get into closing statements. So I'm going to ask the next question, and we'll open it up, and we only have 2 minutes, so please be brief. The question is, and we'll ask Mr. Gertz to start, is Canada's existing debt load manageable, and what is your plan to deal with the debt?
Absolutely not. And we need to balance the budget in 2 years. That is Maxine's Bernier's commitment to you.
Okay, I'm going to have to move on because everybody's going to have an opportunity on this one.
Okay, so the Liberal Party is making smart, necessary investments to grow the economy, and that's working. It's evidence in the 800,000 new jobs that have been created and the historic low unemployment rate that we've seen, the historic lows of the last 40 years. So it's growing the economy. These are necessary investments.
Okay, somebody else?
Yep, the debt is manageable if we stop pretending it's a spending problem and recognize it's a revenue problem. We don't tax the ultra-rich and corporations at the rates that they deserve. We leave $34 billion of unclaimed taxes with the CRA, and we know there's loopholes and offshore money laundering happening right under our nose, and we fail to do anything about it. fossil fuel subsidies are $3 billion a year. It's how we choose to spend our money and who we're supporting, and it's not the working class people.
Okay, next. We don't have time.
Absolutely. Right now, the current debt as it is with the current governments is not manageable. We need new ideas, new plans, forward thinking, and we need to actually have a costed plan that actually shows how we can get back to a balanced budget. The Green Party is the only party right now that has an accosted plan that is up for review for to balance the budget, and that is something that the Green Party is very proud of.
Okay, Mr. Davidson.
Canada's debt is now reached $666 billion. That's $18,000 for every man, woman, and child in Canada. And it's something that's out of control, that the Liberal has broken their promise. It is now at $20 billion, and we can't sustain it.
Okay. That, I regret to say, is all the time we have for all the questions we have, and we've got a ton more we could ask. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. So at this point, I'm going to ask the candidates to present their closing statements, and we will begin in reverse order with Mr. Davidson.
Okay. Thanks again to the organizers of tonight's debate, the Georgina Chambers of Commerce and Rogers TV. And thank you to my fellow candidates. While we may not agree on the appropriate solutions to the many challenges our community and countries face, I applaud you all for the desire to serve your community. Tonight you have heard from 6 local candidates who want to earn your vote. 6 candidates representing different political parties and different visions for the future of the country. In an important by-election like this one right now, I believe it's in our best interest to elect an MP who is ready to hit the ground running and start working hard immediately for the benefits of you and your family. I chose to run for the Conservative Party of Canada because I believe in its leader, Andrew Scheer. Our party has a deep bench of experienced MPs, many former ministers who can immediately step in and help get Canada back on track. We live in a great country. We can do a lot better, however. We owe it to our kids, our grandkids, to build the necessary conditions so Canada can remain competitive in an ever-changing global economy. I am confident that my experience in the private sector, my work ethic, and my strong relationships with leaders throughout our riding will assist me in becoming an MP that serves you, the residents of York-Simcoe. On February 25th, vote Scott Davidson, your Conservative Party of Canada candidate.
Mr. Lunn.
Yes, we seem to keep ping-ponging back and forth. You elect a Conservative, they spend 4 years trying to undo everything the Liberals did. You elect a Liberal, you spend 4 years trying to undo everything that the Conservatives did, and it becomes revenge politics more than forward-thinking politics that actually better the community. We need new blood in Ottawa. We need something that is actually going to help. I need you to help me actually build a new plan for Ottawa, especially to represent this riding. I'd like to be that person that represents you in this riding. If you want to actually help make change, come speak to me after the event. I'll tell you how we can make change together. This is an important by-election because, as again, the United Nations has warned we have 2 years left to act on climate change. If we do not act, then we are going to be left with a severe problem over the next 10 years, and then it's going to become irreversible. We need to act right away. I'd like to be your voice in Ottawa. Vote Green in 2019.
Thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
Okay, so we've heard what everyone has to say here. We've heard their ideas and their priorities, and don't you think it sounds really similar to what we've been hearing for decades? For 12 years, we've had a Conservative representative, and what have we seen? A failure to clean up our lake. Our main streets are still struggling. Inequality is increasing, and we continue to have some of the worst affordable housing rates in the province. As a nation, yes, we keep going between red and blue with the same results. So, I mean, can we continue to buy into these policies and empty promises, or can we try something different, something bold? I mean, let's choose an MP that will stand up for workers and a party that's going to deliver on its promises. Anything we do here should not be a 4-year mission. It shouldn't be about our careers. It shouldn't be about our party's ambitions. It has to be about the people, and not just voters, but their children and their environment and the generations that are going to come afterwards. I've spent tons of time lobbying the government, petitioning the government, protesting the government for more equal and just society, and that means leaving nobody behind. So when this opportunity was presented to me and I was encouraged by my peers to run, I decided that rather than continually fighting from the outside in, I'm going to put myself there. I'm going to be the representation that we deserve, a representative that listens to their community and responds to the interests of the many, not the few.
Ms. Tanaka, please.
So thank you again for coming out and bringing us your questions and challenging us to rise to that occasion. What we've heard from other candidates is that we've ping-ponged back and forth between the Conservatives and the Liberals. The reality is, here we haven't. It was 1993, the last time that we had a Liberal representative. That's why I'm knocking on doors every single day when it's -20 out. That's why I signed up for this job again, because we increased the Liberal voter turnout by 400%. We woke up the riding to the fact that they could have a progressive candidate in Ottawa speaking to them and for their concerns. We are delivering real results here in York-Simcoe. 20,000 children depend on the Canada Child Benefit for things like nutritious food and school supplies and maybe taking up a sport. 17,000 seniors in this riding also rely on it for old age security and the guaranteed income supplement. So no, we haven't had the same old. It's time that we have a strong voice in Ottawa. It's time to finally elect a Liberal MP who can work alongside the government, who can work alongside the cabinet and the Prime Minister, and finally deliver the results that we deserve here in York-Simcoe. Thank you.
Mr. Gertz.
Thank you. We started tonight by me telling you that we have a financial crisis. I know you know that's true because there's been wage stagnation for the last 30, 40 years. Maxime Bernier has a 5-part plan to balance the budget in 2 years. First of all, we have to get rid of the carbon tax. That's a killer. Then we wipe out corporate welfare. That's $5 billion savings. And what none of these others have said is that something has to give. So we have to be able to make the hard choices, and the hard choices is we have to say no to maybe our foreign commitment within the United Nations. That institution has failed us on multiple levels, and we can't continue to fund and carry the whole world. We need a timeout. We need a timeout to collect our thoughts, get our finances in order so that we don't have people lying or sleeping on the streets. We have to liberate the millennials through a creative solution revolution. They can solve our problems. They're smarter than us. If you talk to them, they are so smart that if you give them a chance and we get out of their way, they can go ahead and do it. Now, the problem that we've also got is we're a bunch of hypocrites, at least us politicians, when it comes to the lies and deceit. Trudeau, what did he do to get his job to go from MP to Prime Minister? He promised us oh yeah, it'll be a $10 billion deficit. It won't be a $19 billion one. He then said, oh, I'll balance it in 4 years. I don't see that coming. And then finally, on proportional representation. Do you remember that lie? The lying has to stop. And we need to liberate the millennials through a creative solution revolution, and that's what Maxime Bernier wants to do. He wants to give the money back to you so that you can then liberate your kids.
Thank you very much. So unfortunately, that is all the time we have. And I want to thank our candidates. And one more time, I'm going to go down the line. Robert Gertz, the People Party of Canada. Sean Tanaka, the Liberal Party of Canada. Jessa McLean, the New Democratic Party of Canada. Matthew Lund, the Green Party of Canada. And Scott Davidson, the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you very much. I think you've been a tremendous panel. And I want to thank the Georgina, and I want to thank the Georgina Chamber of Commerce and of course Rogers TV for hosting this debate and sponsoring it for us. And I also want to thank the audience here at the link and our crew. They've done a fantastic job. And I want to thank you for watching. We hope that these discussions will be helpful when you cast your ballot on February the 25th. And so now all you have to do is vote. Thank you for being with us here on Rogers TV.